Hello, and welcome to the Incite Content webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Mark Kirstein, and I'm going to be today's moderator. Content marketing is growing fast. Over 75% of marketers are planning to make more content than they ever have before in the next 6 months. More and more marketers are entering the content game. They're writing, recording, and constructing things their audiences are excited to engage with. No matter what you do, it's a contested space. In fact, I should know. I'm actually Incite Marketing and Communications Content Director and Editor when I'm not running webinars. I'm in the unusual position of not only being tasked with writing and creating content marketing, but of creating content marketing about content marketing. However, please don't think I have set up this webinar just because I have a personal and professional interest in content. The reason I decided to make this webinar about this topic is because you told me to. Yes, you. Incite is a company focused on bringing senior marketing and communications executives together to have robust conversations about their roles. Our summits, such as the upcoming Incite Summit East on November 12th and 13th, and Europe on November 18th and 19th, are assembled using the same principles. Like this webinar, all of the discussions are grounded in the questions and insights of real, working marketers and communicators like yourselves. You can find out more about Incite East and Europe at the links you'll see on your screen. If you get value from working with other senior marketers on topics like this, they're definitely worth a look. Now, I'm always excited to learn what leading marketers, communicators, thinkers, and creators have to say about content, but I'm particularly excited for the lineup of panelists we have today. If I could just ask each of you to introduce yourselves by telling us your full name, title, and the company you work for, that would be great. Susan, would you like to go first?
Hello, my name is Susan Rafizade. I work with SAP, and in my role, I'm the Director of Global Marketing and Life Sciences.
Thank you very much, Susan. We look forward to hearing from you. Okay, now, Baird, could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. My name is Baird Saunders.
Fantastic. Okay, and last but not least, Anne-Marie, could you please introduce yourself?
Communication. Hello, I'm Anne-Marie Gothard, and Director.
Thank you very much, panelists, for joining us. I guess we're going to get started right now. So our first this topic of discussion on content is how to make unmissable content. So this one is definitely important to every marketer. How do you make content that is, to your audience, essentially unmissable? What can you do to make sure your content is as engaging to your audience as it can be? All right, Susan, you're going to lead us off. Our first question is, how can you learn more about your customers and therefore find out
what I basically do? So for me, research is really the basis for every content I create. I think that's true for everybody. And the most with the same persons, because in your comfort zone you only speak with those people you already know well. But I really try to talk to different persons and even to those who are not customers yet but just prospects or who could be my customers. The reason why I do that is feelings. I want to hear what excites them, what makes them upset, what kind of language do they use. If I can meet them even better, then I see what they wear. I really want to know what kind of person, really the core of my research. And on top, of course, I speak to colleagues, to our executives, to sales, priests. And on top, of course, there's the classic analytics part. So we analyze our campaigns, what worked well, what worked less well. We look at the mentions in press, so all the numbers that adds to that. But what I really rely on is on what our customers really tell me, similarly to what Mark said in the introduction.
Absolutely, and I think we can all agree that really understanding your customer through any sort of information you need to know and qualities you need to put into your content later on. So coming off of that point, Baird, I'm going to ask you the next question. What characteristics do you think make content really stand out for your audience?
Hearing the feelings and getting that intent or understanding of the customers as often as possible, and however dialogue you're doing that survey or the thousands of ways to get the but it's characteristic. If this information or whatever your content contains some something that have that customer find that genuinely and not patronizingly useful. There's a difference between the differences and similarities as well. Say, for example, you mentioned the keywords. It might be that you want to show a similarity to some kind of relationship to trending topic, an antithesis of whatever that topic is. Creating the characteristic of a social meme. People often ask, "What is? How do you achieve viral?" Of different ways, but that consistency. And that finding and speaking to the loyal customer base is the only formula that has worked so far in terms of, other than that, it's kittens.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I know I've seen a bit more patronizing, I guess, to use that word, than you want it to be. And it's definitely a hard balance, I find, as a content creator, actually providing that useful content. And I think it's a balance that's always going to be a struggle. So moving off of kind of on the level of consuming content, Anne-Marie, this next question's for you. Since we're all, content marketers, I'm assuming, I know at least I personally consume a lot of content as well besides make.
No, great question. And, looking at it, I think you're absolutely right. I look in terms of for myself when I'm looking at content, but I also tend to look at content, through the lens of our members and our customers. And I think there are probably maybe 4 main areas that that I look at in terms of seeing something, using your term in terms of unmissable. Starting primarily with the source. Who is providing the content, especially if it's someone within our industry or on a particular topic of relevancy. The source is one area that I think is industry. There's so much going on. So in terms of looking what the trends might be, both sort of on the national level as well as the local level, the content that's out there and how relevant it is to the trends that are going to our business, and also to the consumer in terms of how they're interacting and they're creating sort of access to their own health care. Probably the third area then I would look at is, is it something where you can be going to do with it? How can, is it an opportunity even to express an opinion or an opportunity to, sort of conversation or invite others to be part of the conversation? So I think that goes with it. And then I would say probably the last area, when, you talk about sort of unmissable content, it's also the presentation. I the source and the relevance, but again, how is it presented? Is it visual? Is it a graphic? Infographics, I think, is sort of my area of great interest, is just the way that it can pass information along. So seeing, those sort of 4 areas, I would say, kind of make up, or look at in terms of a best practice or something that I want to pass along or figure out how to implement within our own strategy. Those are the things that I probably default to.
Again, it's such a tricky balance with content, because measuring all those things and making sure you're covering both kind of the formats as well as the information you're doing and your understanding of your customers. And we'll definitely be digging into all of that a bit more in the next question. But before we move on to our next topic of discussion, we're actually going to open up a poll answer now under questions. It's popping up on the screen there. That would be great. So this question is, do you think the content marketing space will ever become too crowded to be effective? This is a concern I've heard from some marketers and communicators through my research, that there's just so much noise out there, because as more and more marketers kind of get into the content game and start making things, it becomes harder and harder to stick out. And so just wondering what you guys are thinking on that. So yeah, the more listeners do answer in, that's going to be more useful findings for everyone. So please submit your answer now. And if you have any questions for the panelists after the show, please make sure you submit them in the question box on the left side of your screen. So that'd be great. Okay, so while we wait for some responses, panelists, I'm going to ask you just a quick question. So Susan, do you think you could tell us, are there any new kinds of content you and your team are looking forward to working with, or that you would like to work with in the future?
For sure, that's our main job. So on short and midterm, we will rather follow the science than the art of marketing, because content generation is almost happening by itself because we have so many new topics coming up. First of all, because SAP has many innovations that we need to communicate and to explain what it does mean for life sciences. And second, we have a lot of market changes in life sciences, so we really need to stay up to speed and update our messaging, our blogs, our sales materials, everything. What I would actually like to do more in the future is to really involve customers even more in our content creation. We're already doing that, but really just in a case-by-case basis. And what I would love to do is to create a relationship with some key customers that they actually get proactive bloggers and real brand ambassadors. They're already talking positively about SAP, but I really would like to focus more on building a deeper relationship with them so that they start writing about SAP on their own. So that would be fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah, that all sounds very exciting. And that's a good problem to have, having lots of content coming in that you can use. But yeah, definitely making content into adding more of the scientific side of it and engaging an audience is, I'm sure, something that we're all looking forward to and trying to do as much as possible now, but also working towards in the future. So great. I think we've had some great response so far on the poll. So I guess we're going to the results are up on your screens now. So let's see what we have here. So the answer to our question: do you think the content marketing space will ever become too crowded to be effective? We had 52% say yes, 28% say no, and 20% say they weren't sure. So panelists, I guess if we want to look at look at this response real quick and maybe give some thoughts on it. So I guess my first question will be for Baird on this, if that's all right. So why do you think, Baird, that that marketers feel this way? What do you think about these results?
It's an interesting question, first of all, and it goes to the perception of what people are conceiving when or including when they say content marketing. So as many spaces that have been created over the past, the buzzwords that come up, perhaps content marketing might be a rising meme. Yeah, you can certainly understand how marketers could have some trepidation about it continuing. But I think ultimately the content space challenge is one that's being answered by the differential in creating content and the considerations now, not simply for keywords, but for key intents of your consumer, key intent being the ultimate driver there. So it's interesting, and I'm glad to see that 20% are not sure.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if there was I don't know, if there were fewer who aren't sure or more not sure, because I mean, it's I will say it is a bit of a tricky question, and the definition of the content marketing space is pretty flexible, but still interesting results. And yeah, so maybe if I could just ask one more question following up on that, Anne-Marie. Do you think that it's how important do you think it is to stand out from sort of the rest of your space compared to just delivering that consistent message or building a loyal customer base in the first place? Maybe it's kind of jumping the gun to be worried about your message not standing out as long as you have people who are listening to it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I think it's kind of following up what Baird was saying a minute ago. A fine line between standing out and within sort of the industry, but then also sort of the relevancy factor. Yes, I think we all want to stand out, but you also want to make sure that we are providing content in a way that consumers can use and find that value. I'm just kind of thinking, looking at some of our strategy in terms of what we do. We may not be sort of the leader when you look at data and measurement, but in terms of the interaction, in terms of having people participate, pass along, those sorts of things, using our content and really the staying power of content, I think is equally valuable. So when you look at the question that you put out there about will it become too crowded, there's already so many sources in terms of just to find the content and pull it down, but are those sources reaching the right people at the right time when they're looking for it in order to be able to do something with it? And I think that's where we have to find that balance between being sort of, you said, sort of the leader and the forefront just to create noise, or is it really providing that value? Are we creating that value with the content?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, personally, I think it really all just comes down to value. And if you're focusing on delivering value to your customers, then what you're doing is ultimately going to be worthwhile and going to have staying power. And yeah, I agree that that's probably the most important thing to focus on, though it is a bit scary that 50% of marketers think that it's going to be eventually become too crowded. But who knows? That's all these new spaces, there's naturally going to be some fear about what's going to come next. So all right, moving on to our next discussion point. We're going to cover now sort of about how you put your content in the right place, and then the channels and areas you focus on. So this is really all about delivering content, because as we all know, it doesn't really matter how good your content is if it isn't in a place where your audience is. So I guess back to Anne-Marie again. My first question for this discussion is, how do you personally stay abreast of new platforms, or how do marketers in general? How do you decide whether something like a Vine or Tumblr is going to be worth testing to see if it's going to contribute to your mix?
Yeah, I think you sort of asked 2 points. My own personal, and then looking in terms of my role and for what we do for our organization. Some of it is just testing, playing around with it. If something comes on the market, trying it, working with our team internally, having them test and their experience with it. I think then looking sort of at a particular platform, we look at what we refer to as our consumer experience life cycle and the various stages that a consumer goes through in terms of acquiring or purchasing and even utilizing their health coverage. Our industry, health insurers, were, I would say, rather sort of late or slow adopters to some of the digital strategies and platforms that are out there, but looking at how someone shops for a product, or looking at a new member when they're seeking care, or even when it comes to opportunities for so that service experience, where are the platforms that we can help influence and provide insight so people understand, again, going back to sort of the value of their coverage, what it means, whether it's for, whether they're, we look at also, I'd say, various stages. If someone is healthy and wants to stay healthy, so from the health and wellness, or if someone's managing, a chronic illness, where are the opportunities for us to influence, and then where are they going to get their information, their sources, again, so that we can be part of the discussion and provide information that allows them to manage whatever it might be that they need at that particular time in their life. So when new platforms come on to the market, and we can see the potential opportunity. One is sort of that buzz factor, which I think we all take into consideration. But again, it's great that it may have that buzz factor, but is it really getting at the level where we need to have interaction? So we may do some testing. Again, as I said, we're sort of late adopters, but trying to find opportunities where we can take advantage of some of the new platforms, and then even test with messaging and the packaging and the presentation of content is something that we're always experimenting with.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's something that I imagine a lot of marketers are dealing with, because I mean, there are just a lot of industries such as health insurance, healthcare, and really quite a wide number where certain channels just wouldn't be as appropriate as others. So, but I definitely agree it's important to just experiment and look for, again, going back to where your customers are first. I'm seeing that as a theme coming up in this webinar of focusing where they are and what's going to be useful to them, and I think that's all really valuable points. So My next question is going to be for Susan, but do you have any examples of the types of content that work best for specific platforms, and any insight on how you would determine the right approach for the platforms you use?
Yes, so the type of content, you could either define it by a topic or by the format. And what we heard today already is that visual content is very effective, no matter which platform, and I can only agree to that. So our videos, be it testimonials or animated video or interactive videos, those work really good, really well. The same applies to infographics, 2 pages, and of course they need a lot of pictures, so they can be consumed much faster and easier. Short blogs, but then you also have to embed your pictures, so make it as visual as possible. Or from a content type of view, we try to be either educational, if it's, for example, about new regulation our customers are interested in, or about the best practice, how to approach a business problem, or just thought leadership topics. For example, we are talking about trends like future of work or networked economy, so these are really hot topics within SAP in general. Or if you would like to convince your buyer within his buying cycle, so giving examples how other customers approach a certain business issue and how SAP helped them overcome this issue. So these are the 2 types, so either by topic or by format. Some examples what has worked well for me personally or for SAP Life Sciences. One example that does not contain any visuals, but it's still very entertaining and easy to consume. That's the SAP radio show, done by a very good moderator. She's really funny, and she puts together some experts, and then they talk about really visionary topics. So, for example, we have coming up a topic about R&D in life sciences in September. So this is a really broad topic, so it fits to the SAP radio show because anybody can listen if it's our target market or even a bit broader. So it's also quite awareness that we are in the life sciences space. A second example would be where I would like to show that the topic really is leading and not really the platform. So we had one story about a proteomics database done by the Technical University of Munich in collaboration with SAP. And that worked really well on different platforms. It was covered very well by the press. The videos were viewed very often, the blog as well, on Twitter. It really had very good responses. So all formats went well, but the topic was just relevant. It was so exciting that our customer achieved a big scientific success, and so it went well through various formats. I mean, in B2B, certain formats like Vine or Tumblr, I don't consider that much because in a business context you might not watch that often. So that applies probably more to B2C, or if you're closer to B2B2C, but I really do the hard B2B.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so, and how I decide that, you really have to know your customer. That's what we said before. And then really listen to the channels. So read a lot and analyze what you're finding out. Ideally, you double check again with your target market, but I think just by analyzing and listening, you can already find out much. And then be brave. Just try it, fail, analyze why you failed, or if it went well, repeat it. So just be brave.
Definitely. That's a very strong note to end on. And yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic. I mean, a radio show, again, that's just, you know, a way to be more, to try and take a risk and do something that maybe other people aren't doing, and find out that you actually can make a space for yourself. That's really interesting, as well as the focusing on the topic. And I mean, I guess ultimately, if the topic's interesting, maybe after a point, the platform isn't as important, or it's just a matter of picking the best of many good platforms for a topic. Let's see. So for my last question on this discussion point is for Baird, And I was just curious, what's been the most effective way for you to disseminate content to your audience?
Well, and again, it goes, I guess, type of content, but whether or not you're talking about topics or whether you're talking about visuals or videos or whatnot, the effectiveness is always a question of measuring according to cost versus eyeballs in the traditional media sense. And so one would presume if the views is part of the, that's ultimately the effective measure. And presumably, this is done in accordance with, as we've said earlier, and I think it's really important to highlight here the customer journey. Following that customer really is where the most effective dissemination is going to occur, because you can certainly go against the grain. There's lots of innovation. There's always going to be new and exciting things to try. In this space. I hope there are, because it's certainly what's driven it so far. But that customer journey piece is sometimes ignored, and or there's pieces of it that really should be looked at more holistically. So depending upon the type of content, it is really across a universe really that we're looking to disseminate. So must take into consideration traditional media, television and radio, and newspapers as well, print, other things. So, but ultimately, digitally, TV, website, mobile, these are the distributions. How effective it is done. Effectively it's done depends upon the goals of the organization. So in our experience at the General, we've had tremendous, 50 years of success really in the traditional side, but then led the website and the mobile forays in for our industries. So I have some really unique insights in terms of where that dissemination works incredibly well for our audiences, and what dissemination doesn't. So there's been quite a bit of success in the website and in the television side. On YouTube, there's been both success on the side of distribution from a channel perspective, creating and disseminating content, but then that content then has now also been repurposed in a new way that it had not been before into the actual pre-rolls and the other sorts of advertising things that happen. So there's a bit of a meeting of the minds and editorially with church and state, and I'm finding a lot more of that coming together where the dissemination questions are not simply relied upon the media buyers and individuals, but it is in fact key that the creative folks are involved in this. So there's been quite a few experiments on the social media side, Facebook, Twitter, Vine, Facebook, of course, the most eyeballs. As far as the effectiveness is concerned, we'll talk about KPIs in a minute. Measuring that ROI in terms of actual sales that is a different story. So there's while we may have found the most effective way to disseminate, then there's the question of closing that loop and measuring that the catch that you get with that dissemination. And I also want to mention how important it is, I think, in terms of being ahead of the customer. And well, you can follow the customer, but I also think it's important to innovate and lead the competition. One of the things that I think is I'm looking at now from a content standpoint is wearables, and how consumers will adopt that. We'll be seeing some new interesting innovations coming out this fall. If we can create content for those in some way, it's the immediacy of that's very appealing.
Absolutely. And I think that's definitely a tension that a lot of content marketers are looking at, between both, following the customer journey, which as you mentioned, and I'm sure we all agree, is very important to figure out what's the best way to disseminate your content, but also finding, leading the way and delivering your content in places where people maybe didn't expect it, but find they actually really welcome it and enjoy it. So always interested to see how the future like that, and once we get into wearables, it's going to basically be science fiction. So excited to look for that. But now we're going to move on to our next poll. So if If anyone listening, could you please put in an answer as soon as you can. Our question is going to be, how much more of your total potential audience could your content reach? So if you could just give us an answer in the poll section of the webinar platform, that would be great. And so as we get answers for that, I'm just going to ask a quick question to Baird again. Baird, do you think you could tell us, do you think it's more important to be trying to reach more of your current audience with your content or to find new audiences? Oh, sorry, we're having some technical problems there, Baird. Yeah, sorry about that.
There we go. Yeah, that's it. Hello. Okay, so I think critical is trying to reach business goals. So ultimately, how you are measuring your success, whether it's and I would say, for us it's moving sales, but more than that, it's actually we're measuring for lift in developing content and creating this. So it's a different sort of objective. So I would say that critically, it's important for us to find both. Overall, and that might be different absolutely different for different organizations. Startups have to find new audiences. Those who are working in any kind of established, and I think B2B critically probably has to have more establishment of content with the current audience and to keep them at all engaged. And engagement is probably a key measurement for that. But ultimately, I think there's a I guess content value here that's intrinsic. Now, businesses have always used content. If we're just focusing on it now or using the premise of content marketing to take a look in a lens on this, it's always really been part of the value chain of the relationship with consumers. So there is, and at some point we'll talk a little bit later about the value. They spoke about value of very strong relationships. For some, certainly on the consumer side, there's a value of the shallow relationship to take a look at, and that's the people who brush up against your content and may not engage whatsoever until there's some sort of personal need. So different story. But I think really content's role can be both.
Absolutely. Now, I'm getting word in here that actually our poll isn't working too well. I'm afraid it's gone down. Well, that's radio, folks. So I guess just moving on to the next discussion point then. Our final topic is going to be on, as Baird was mentioning, finding out what your content is worth. Essentially, how can you find an ROI for content, or how will you be able to, as well as the numbers to track on content, and adding, as Susan said before, the science to the art of content. So my first question is for Anne-Marie. So I was wondering, which key performance indicators do you look for in your content? Is it views, read times, click-throughs, shares, and why do you look for those?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a combination of all of those, and but if I step back and kind of look at the areas where we've had probably the greatest success, or at least maybe sharing is, or those areas of KPIs that serve as our foundation, four areas pop into mind. One definitely is being the share of voice. With all of the noise and all the conversation with Obamacare and the changes happening in the healthcare industry, we want to make sure that our dimensions about us are breaking through or getting through, that we are hitting on sort of the key points about how our products and services, because ultimately it's all about lead generation and sales. So share of voice is probably one of the top sort of KPIs for us. The other one I would say is we monitor, we track in terms of our engagement with the influencers, because they're a trusted source, and as for health insurance, as an industry, we have a low NPS score. So in terms of finding individuals or finding organizations within the communities or in our service area that we can engage with and can pass along and really take our messaging and demonstrate the value of it, to their networks, to their constituents, is something that we actively monitor, so that, within our network and our communities, we have some influencers that we can see how they can move a needle on a particular topic. And probably the other two areas fall more into, behavioral. There are things that we would like to be able to do in terms of, how can we use content to help advance, behavioral change, or in terms of how people consume and how they use their health care. So there are certain terms, especially again looking at, the B2C market in which healthcare is now entered with, the opening of the exchange here in New York, or the federal exchange as well as the national exchanges. But certain words and certain, behavior that people, and how they're making decisions, are they selecting, are they canceling, their commitment, things like that help us determine the mindset, and then that allows us to address and modify not only both our messaging, but also the delivery of the platform in which we want to have the information presented.
Yes, definitely. I think that's all really strong points. And I'm just getting word in now that our poll is working again. So please vote while we discuss this topic, and we'll have a look after we get through with that. So my next question, coming off Anne-Marie's points, is for Baird. And I was curious, what qualities of your content, Baird, what qualities of the content itself, such as length or topic or keywords, do you find have the most effect over the KPIs that you're looking at?
Right, and as far as focus goes for us, if the choices are views or click-throughs and shares, ultimately the qualities is how much content is, I would like to say, driving sales, but we can. I'm not certain we can ultimately measure that completely because of the lack of a closed loop. We can certainly make some estimations and some assumptions about content's role is played, but certainly the cost of leads can be measured. And so as part of that, if the qualities of those items which have the most effect over it, overall, I would say across the board, regardless of and it's been type of content, has been that tagging, tag management or keyword management that ultimately I think has the most dramatic effect in terms of the value. So there's a relationship here to paid search as well, where and earlier we were talking about how to sort of make things useful and valuable to customers, as understanding there should be a sort of a Kaizen relationship between your learnings from where your search is having the most effect currently, because that's constantly changing. There's constantly new keywords and intents and things coming up as customers are telling you what they're looking for, and as you're measuring the most valuable of those should then have some effect and advise the development and the editorial pieces of whatever your content form takes in order to, again, make it useful, relevant to consumers. So those, I think those would be the quality. That would be, ultimately, if I had to pick of all of them, proper tagging and keywording.
Definitely. Yeah, I find those are so critical to the effects of the content I do. But yeah, ultimately, and it becomes kind of a tricky question as well, because you can track all these KPIs, but there's so much that no matter how much we can understand, we can never understand anything, and you never know the full effects of the usefulness of content, for example. You can never really measure that, but obviously it's going to be so critical for everything. So now we've just gotten the results from our polls, if we could just run through that quickly. So the question was, how much more of your total audience do you think you can reach by your content? And we got lots of responses. So 3% said not much more. We've found most of our audience. Unsurprisingly, that's quite a low number. 18% said some more. We've reached more than half of our audience. So that's for those who feel like they're reaching saturation point. 54% said a lot more. We're reaching less than half of our audience. and then 24% said we don't know how much of our audience we're reaching. So if you guys want to have a look at those real quickly. Susan, I guess I'll ask my first question to you. What do you think about those results? Do you feel like at SAP, where do you feel like you fall in those categories? Are you reaching? Do you feel like you're reaching your audience, or that you have a full understanding of your audience?
Well, I represent only life sciences, so I don't want to represent whole SAP right now. As our target market is changing, because we bring to market new solutions, so we also have different decision makers in the organizations, and then our target market expands. So I think there is, currently we have to work against that and to find the new contact persons and really approach them. So because of these innovations, I would say we're probably reaching, it's difficult to estimate what makes now, maybe half, because there are so many lines of business where we have new solutions, and that's something completely new. But I think in our traditional space, like finance, HR, there we are covered already pretty well. Supply chain, yeah.
I think that's an important point you bring up, that in this question it makes it seem like an audience is quite a static thing that never changes. But of course, our industry is constantly changing very quickly, so and as do your audiences. So which obviously makes it difficult to really even know the size of your audience, which I imagine is part of the reason why almost a quarter of our respondents said they didn't know how much their audience was reaching, because I mean, an audience is a constantly variable thing. So if we could just, going back to our discussion of content and ROI, if I could just ask one more question on that to Anne-Marie, which is, why is ROI for content something companies should try to find, and what are the benefits once they do?
I think probably, yeah, it's interesting, because I think, we're, as both, Susan and Barrett mentioned, we are constantly being challenged to demonstrate the value. And a couple things come to mind when I, think about, sort of internally and how, working with our team and our senior leadership about the value of content. A couple things come to mind, and I think one is that unlike sort of, advertising, content is definitely, I think it's has more of a staying power. It's lasting and it's more permanent. Once something is sort of published, whatever channel you decide to use or select, it's out there. It's out there for a while, and people, can always find it. How do we put a value on that? I think is something as an industry, still debating and still, trying to figure out sort of, the best practice when it comes around that. But in terms of the value of content, that's one of the points that I share with our leadership team, is that, definitely the staying power for it. And it's something that we can realize, depending on what the message is or what the action might be, there's definitely benefits for months. So using whether if it's, featured articles, videos, or white papers, those are the things that people can continually refer back to. So definitely I think that's one of the things in terms of, sort of the value of using content. The other area I would say, one of the things that I think most organizations do is, when it comes to their brand. And I think by using content, it also is another opportunity to, to gain trust, as well as sort of move along sort of the needle in your own, reputation as an organization. So finding those platforms that allow us to talk about sort of the, our products or our services which help, I guess, when it comes to decision making or selection, that's something, that we default to. And, going back a minute ago when you're talking about audience, looking at segmentation, really being able to demonstrate that, you know who your audience base is or who your customer base is. And, one example I can share is, for example, when, the New York State of Health Marketplace opened up on the exchange, everyone thought that, young invincibles were going to be the ones who were going to be purchasing because they're healthy, don't necessarily need coverage, but, they might need it. comes to find out that in the first year of enrollment, it was really an older audience. So those health plans that sort of recognized that they needed to segment their messaging and also, the delivery of those messages, they ended up getting a greater share of the newly insured. So I think being able to have that sort of insight and then develop, the content and a content strategy around that, can go to the bottom line. But how to put that dollar amount to it, I think, is still one area that I know as an organization we're still challenged with as we look at our various dashboards across sort of our entire platform or portfolio of marketing communication initiatives.
Absolutely, and I think it's going to be something that content marketers are going to be struggling with for a while, because there are so many intangible benefits to content on top of what we can track. But and I actually recently wrote something on this topic myself, so again, writing content about content. But I do believe that as we can track more and more, I think it really opens up options for us as content marketers to justify what we do and learn how to do it better, which is extremely exciting, and I think one of the fastest growing and most interesting parts of our field. So now I think we'll move into the questions from the audience stage. If any, if you have a question, please do submit it in the section on the left of your screen under questions. So great. So my first question from our audience is for Susan. And this is, do you believe that storytelling can help organizations to improve their communication and marketing?
Could you please repeat the question, because I couldn't hear it completely?
Sure, no problem. So that first question is, do you believe that storytelling can help organizations to improve their communication and marketing?
Absolutely. I mean, this is really important, not only that you hit on the right topics, but that you tell it in the way that it's nice to consume, easy to consume, and that it gets memorized. If you don't tell a story, people probably read and then forget. If you tell a story, if you make it personal, if you give good examples, if you make it funny if possible, if you give it your personal touch and make it maybe a little bit emotional, concrete, all these storytelling techniques are really important to improve your marketing, because it's, what is your marketing worth if it gets many clicks but nobody memorizes, or if nobody builds a preference built on what they see or read?
Absolutely, and I'll tell you from my personal experience, it's so hard to make content funny, but I know it works. Whenever I see anything that makes me chuckle when I've read it, I'll remember it for months and I'll tell people about it. Whereas, but of course, it's a very difficult thing to approach. But always looking for new ways to experiment with that. Now, if I could ask one more question, just a quick answer from each of you. I'll go around, starting with you, Susan, again, and we'll go Susan, Baird, and Marie. Yeah, I guess we'll probably know for the answer for you, Susan. But who creates your content? How much of it is internal, and how much of it is external?
I'm sorry again, I couldn't hear the question.
Sure.
Because I hear that I'm unmuted.
Yes, that's been happening to me as well. So the question is, who creates your content? Is it how much of it is internal, and how much of it is external?
That's a good question, really. So that really varies between the different organizations within SAP. So I'm really speaking for myself. Mm-hmm. And I actually prefer to create most of my content on my own, or as much as I can. So the majority comes from myself, actually, or from colleagues. And when we reach the maximum of our capacity, then of course we also use external agencies. But we try really to create everything on our own, or as much as possible.
Fantastic. Now, Baird, how much of your content is internal or external?
Is it unmuted? Can you hear me?
Yes, you're unmuted. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a mixture, and has been as a result of the competencies of the organization. So within those again, the purpose of the content, and there is some that is generated by us internally. Some, because partly this is a regulated industry, there's also some that's in response to regulation, and so that is, a lot of that is somewhat internal with advisors, that sort of thing. But then there is an element of content, certainly on the consumer side, that we pay a number of professionals to produce, and some who are specialized in the medium itself. So if the message of the medium is still true, then there are folks who I find creatively work exceptionally well with small screens versus large. There's the devices themselves really are presenting a challenge.
Great, I imagine, and I'm sure that's something that everyone's looking forward to differently as they make different content for more channels and devices. And now, Anne-Marie, how about yourself?
Yeah, similar to Baird, we have a mix too. I would say majority of it is generated in-house. One area, just looking at one of our sort of within our marketing communication world, our community marketing area and some of the work and things that they do, that content is probably generated more through our agency, partly because it's how it's directly supported to some of our initiatives and our activations out in the communities. But for the most part, I would say it's in-house within from across our not only just marketing communications, but looking at our various business departments, lines of business, the communicators in those areas as well.
Absolutely, yeah. That's all great insight from the three of you. Well, I'm afraid we have to draw the webinar to a close, but I just want to thank everyone for listening. I think we've had a really great discussion today and have learned. I know personally I've definitely opened my eyes to some aspects of content I hadn't been thinking about. I'd like to give a special thanks to our fine panelists for sharing their valuable insight on content, Susan Rafizada, Baird Saunders, and Anne-Marie Gothard. Thank you. If you want to hear more conversations like these, then head on over to InciteMC.com and check out our upcoming summits in New York and London, where you can hear more hard-hitting, in-depth conversations between high-level brand marketers on all the most crucial topics to the space. We have CMOs from Heinz, AOL, Patagonia, Prudential, Boots, and O2 speaking at our events on in-depth on topics such as multi-channel marketing, big data, and customer centricity. Also, stay tuned, as we'll be running another webinar next month on multi-channel marketing. Do join us. So this has been Mark Kirstein with Incite Marketing Communications. Thanks for listening.